What is the worst thing you've ever seen happen at a wedding? Divorced father of the groom started up about how much better his new wife was compared to his old wife during his speech. On and on in the qualities of Asian women vs white women. I've never looked at my shoes so hard in my life. As an American guy dating in Asia, these guys are cancer. I'm in the Philippines right now doing an internship and went out with some Korean friends last Saturday. An old white guy sat down at our table next to one of the girls and kept trying to talk to her about how much better America was and how he wanted to marry an Asian girl and take her back there. I'm black, but I can pass for Filipino when I'm sitting, and he kept going on and on about how much better American guys are. We let him keep talking and buying us drinks for a couple hours before I casually mentioned I was American too. He immediately got super aggressive with the girl sitting between us, and when I told him to chill, he said he had spent too much on us to go home alone. When he tried to force her to stand up, I stood up and basically had to drag him away from them. Stupidest thing was he only spent around 1500 pesos or like 30. The sister of the bride who wasn't invited showed up drunk and got in a fight with the bride until the father of the bride broke it up by putting the sister in a chokehold and dragging her out of the venue. The bride was surprisingly fine afterwards. Source: I'm a wedding caterer. I was at a wedding where the best man got up and explained how important this speech was to him. Because even though he has an stutter in public, speaking is very hard for him. The groom had picked him. It immediately became clear that his stutter was severe. But everyone of course looked at each other like, isn't this amazing? What a touching moment. It felt like a movie moment as he struggled forward into what we all assumed would be a poignant speech. However, it quickly became clear that this was indeed one of the worst best man speeches of all time, with him referencing exes, sex stories, jokes about the groom's small dick, and how hot he thought the bride was. But of course, it was all coming out in a slow, horrible stutter that made everything much, much worse. At the end, everyone was mortified except for him. He looked incredibly proud. One of my wife's coworkers got married this past summer. Her father passed away from a fatal heart attack the morning of the wedding, but her family insisted and convinced her to go in with it. So she did. It was awkward as hell and nobody in the building made it through without crying. Even the minister. My mother-in-law handed out an ep of my now sister-in-law to as many guests as she could and threw a fit in the middle of the dance floor later that night because I didn't let her daughter sing with the band or karaoke. Her exact words were, "How dare you make today all about you? It was my wedding day." I worked weddings for a living and once saw the best man get loaded, give a speech, and profess his love of the bride and how they had slept together 2 nights before. Open bar. 1. Best man. 0. That open bar did the groom a favor. I hope he was able to nullify his marriage though, because giving a speech usually is after the main wedding ceremony. Just prior to my sister's wedding ceremony beginning, as everyone was getting in place and last minute things were being done in this big old Catholic church, my father noticed a woman with a confused look at the back of the church and approached her, asking if she needed anything. She informed him she was the bride, then opened a beat up suitcase she had which contained something resembling a wedding type dress. My father, suspecting she had some mental health issues, played along, suggesting that she may be in the wrong church. When that didn't work, he slipped off and called the police. In the meantime, the lady walked up to my soon-to-be brother-in-law and said, "You aren't going to leave me this time." When the police pulled up to the church, the lady spotted them and made a quick exit. Turns out she had a habit of pulling the stunt. My brother-in-law still occasionally reminds my sister that he had a choice on their wedding day, but still chose her. The bride fainted and hit her head hard enough to go to the hospital in an ambulance. No refunds. So they amazingly still had the reception. Pretty subdued. We had a few drinks and just left. Not a bad thing that happened for me. Just really awkward. Went to wedding of someone from my church a few years back. When it came time to say the vows, he pulls out a sheet of paper and reads on for like 5 minutes, getting really intimate and pouring his heart out to her. It was kind of awkward tbh. But the icing on the cake was her response. When he was done, she just giggled loudly and awkwardly and got out ditto. That's it. That was her wedding vow. So freaking awkward. This is close to home. My first marriage. I had spent weeks writing my vows. They were not super long, but they were thought out and heartfelt. On the day of, husband-to-be informed me that he had not written his vows. Hadn't even thought of it. He kept asking to see mine. I told him no, and that he needed to come up with his own. During our small ceremony, I took out my vows and read them. When it came to his turn he just said, "Well, you pretty much said everything that I was going to say. So yeah." I was so hurt that he put zero effort into even attempting to wing it. That was one of many indicators that I should have just called it off. Bride never showed up. My cousin was the groom and had about 500 people in attendance. He got on the mic and said there's no bride. So we had the party anyway. He married someone else 2 years later. That is so peeping sad. Glad it turned out well for him, but really, standing him up at the altar. If that happens to you, I wonder if a little part of you says thank God. Absolutely. Bridal faceplant followed by a girdle breaking, which led to the dress ripping. I worked at a wedding venue for 4 years. Having to stop a bride's stepdad from hitting her over the head with a chair was a highlight. The whole room were just fighting with each other. The best man kicked the mother-in-law. Different wedding. Some dickhead bit the DJ because he refused to play a certain song. For me, the absolute worst one was when the newlyweds were arguing at the end of the night. In front of their young son. She admitted to cheating on him. It all came out there and then in front of his family, and he was devastated. What is with this thread and people biting each other? There was this guy outside of the hotel walking up to groups of people in the smoking area, asking how much each person weighed. He was very overweight himself, and his jeans looked to be on inside out. He was severely underdressed for the occasion, and no one seemed to know him. Anyways, he would ask a person's weight, and then exclaim, "I can bench that." Until one guy, I think he was a family member of the bride, got into an argument with him, and started asking around if anyone knew this person, figuring that he was a wedding crasher. That's when this gentleman decided to cut a deal with everyone. "If I can pick up that bench with my bare hands, can I stay for the party?" To which everyone agrees, because the bench was clearly bolted to the ground. So, he walks over, puts his hands on the bench, crouches down, and with all of his might, sweeps his pants in front of everyone. He stood up and waddled off through the parking lot to never be seen again. I did hear throughout the night people talking about a guy who was on shrooms outside, trying to lift a bench. So, I guess he was also tripping balls. I'm so jealous to have not experienced this story firsthand. Eat a speep ton of food. Stand outside a wedding. Take shrooms. Boom. The perfect first-hand experience. I ruined my cousin's wedding videos and I'll never live it down. When I was 13, my cousin got married, and my brother was in charge of photography and video for the day. At some point in the day, my brother gave me the camcorder and told me to shoot and take video. Longer story shorter, I was unknowingly recording when myself and another cousin were talking about girls at the wedding, and as one girl walked by I said I would peep that girl in the peeping ass. 1 week later, the whole entire family decided to watch the video of the wedding, and I have never felt so peeping embarrassed in my life. Edit. No, I never actually peeped that girl in the peeping ass. But my family occasionally likes to ask, "Hey, you gonna peep that girl in the peeping ass?" Whenever I bring a new girl around, usually while she's standing right next to me. I'm 25 now, and it's been a funny 12 years at my expense. Peepers. And you learned the most important lesson about electronic media. The mic is always on. The groom was drinking heavily, and by the time the cake was supposed to be cut, he was passed out at the back of the room. The bride was crying hysterically. Dad stepped in and cut the cake with the bride. Former matridotal. Bride's stepmother and mother got into a fight. Stepmother bit the mother. Wedding went to a screeching halt. But what? Yup. Straight up chomp. Don't think it broke the skin, but it definitely left an ugly swollen bruise. All I can think is y'all breaking them up, saying we don't bite our friends, and sending them to the corner. What adult bites someone? There was like an 8-year-old boy who had loads of confetti in his hand, so I didn't think much of it. Turns out he thought it was sugar paper, and ate all of. He then proceeded to projectile vomit everywhere through the middle of the ceremony. Was one of the funniest and most disgusting moments of my life. I'm just trying to imagine his thought process. Well, the first one didn't taste like sugar. Let's try another. No, just paper. Maybe this yellow bit over here. Well, I'll be darned. Let's try the red. After arriving 45 minutes after the ceremony was to begin, during the ring exchange, the groom gets this blank look and says he didn't know he was supposed to buy her another ring. Sil slipped off her wedding band and handed it off to the preacher. This is probably something they should have discussed beforehand. The wedding ring isn't supposed to be a surprise. Nervous groom stood with his legs straight for too long. Fell forward and knocked himself out cold, hitting the first step to the platform with his head. For the bouquet toss, a middle-aged guy forced his middle-aged girlfriend out onto the floor, then stood by her so she couldn't leave. The bouquet was caught by an excited little girl. The guy proceeded to yank the bouquet out of the little girl's hands, gave it to his middle-aged girlfriend, then ran off the floor cheering loudly to high-five one of his buddies. The little girl ran away crying. What the f***? How does anybody convince themselves that that's okay? Because they are a cunt.